Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Good afternoon and welcome to Collaborative Connections radio show and podcast sponsored by KLM Consulting. I'm your host, Kelly Lorenzen. We're coming to you live from the comforts of our home while Karen Nowicki is producing the show at Phoenix Business RadioX studio inside Mac 6. Collaborative Connections is a radio series created to bring entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and associations together to build relationships, foster collaboration, and grow a stronger community together. Our hope for today is that listeners and guests alike will walk away with a golden nugget or a new resource for their business. The sponsor of our show, KLM Consulting, is an on-demand concierge marketing and project management firm with over 17 years of award-winning business savvy. Today, I have the honor of being in the studio of three amazing people, as usual. I would love to introduce you to, first, Mayor Corey Woods. Thanks for coming to the show today.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate you having me on today.
I'm looking forward to a great conversation. Thomas Barr, thanks for being on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kelly. Excited for the conversation.
Local First Arizona. It's one of my favorite associations as a member. And Jihan, Cottrell, Cox Business, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Kelly. I look forward to having a great discussion with you.
You're great. Jihan and I have been friends for a long time in the Tempe Chamber, and he's a huge advocate for small businesses and large businesses. And sponsorships and all. So I appreciate you, Jihan. I'd like to have everybody who doesn't know you, each of you, tell us a little bit about you, where you come from. This conversation, I'm hopefully will be lively. Like to cover some current events, obviously, your business and future endeavors we hope to do together. So tell me, and for the listeners, a little bit about your background, where you come from, and what you're working on right now. Corey, I'll start with you.
Sure. So Corey Woods, a newly elected mayor of the City of Tempe. I previously spent 8 years as a city council member between 2008 and 2016 right here in Tempe. I grew up in New Rochelle, New York, which is in Westchester County, right outside of the Bronx. I moved out to Michigan to go to school at the University of Michigan. I've got a bachelor's in political science and a minor in African American studies. Moved out to Arizona back in 2003 to pursue a master's at Arizona State University. And I've got a master's in educational policy studies and evaluation. And just excited that I started as mayor on July 2nd. So this is my second full week as mayor and working on everything from tackling police reform, talking about how to help our businesses get through the COVID-19 crisis, affordable housing, homelessness. So there's a whole bunch of things on my agenda. And I'm just really excited to work with the city council and our staff and our residents to get the job done and move the city forward.
Sounds exciting. I can't wait to hear about it. Thank you so much. Thomas, tell us a little bit about you, where you come from, and Local First.
Sure. I am one of the very few born and raised Arizonans. They say about 2/3 of us are from another place. So we'll see. I know Corey's not from here. I'm not sure about the rest on the show today, but I'm usually the odd person out that is actually from here. I grew up loving this place and wanted to commit myself to helping others love it too and build opportunity and equity in our state. Growing up through times, I was a freshman in college when the Great Recession hit, and it inspired me to commit myself to work towards building more local ownership opportunities for our communities. So I've been with Local First Arizona doing this work for 8 years, and our work as the largest local business coalition in the country is to provide a voice for small businesses and resources and education for them, but to also work towards the really complex issues that exist in our economy and society that hinder us from having a really fluid, strong local economy. So I'm really passionate about a wide variety of issues, but love the work that we do at Local First. It provides me an opportunity to collaborate with a lot of really incredible people.
You guys do some amazing things, and isn't it cool to see the silver lining or the positive things that come out of all of this, that's happening right now? And you guys are doing a great job. So congratulations on that. Jihan, tell us a little bit about you, where you come from, and Cox Business.
All right. So in the beginning, no, we won't go that far. So I moved to the Phoenix area about 21 years ago. Met the love of my life, my wife, and we've been together ever since. We have 4 kids we've raised here in Arizona. I moved here from Salt Lake City, Utah, which I was glad to get out of as far as snow and things that I don't have any snow recreation or fields that I do. I don't ski or any of that. So I love the sun and love the winters here. From a Cox Business perspective, I mean, we are, moving ahead. I think that all of our work that we've done as far as putting fiber in the ground and upgrading our network has come to fruition. Now you're seeing it as people are networking in different ways. And, the internet has become kind of our lifeblood right now. I actually had to have a conversation with my kids to make sure that nobody's, seamlessly streaming videos or whatnot, because I have an interview that I don't want to break up. So when we look at the things that we've done, I think from, my 15 years that I've worked with Cox, I'm really proud of the company, what we stand for, and what they've been able to do. Now, moving forward, as far as into this new normal, Cox has purchased a cloud solutions company. So we offer cloud solutions from everything from Office 365, desktop as a service, things of that nature, in order where you see us actually sitting right now. So I'm really excited for Cox Business and what we can do in the future, and especially for small business.
Yeah, you guys are a huge help in our community, and been an advocate of Tempe Chamber and been on the board with all of us, and we're thankful for you and your dedication, and for Cox for contributing. So thank you very much. So let's dive in. I'd love to know, there's a lot of current affairs going on. So, Corey, you don't know me very well. We've met a few times, but I'll tell you, I'm not a political person at all. But I am a Tempe native, and huge business advocate, especially small business. I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. So I'm thankful for, when the cities and local first and chambers step in and help us as small businesses. So from your perspective, things that you're looking forward to, what's coming, what are you changing, what are you hoping to see moving forward? And current events, everybody, of course, police reform and Black Lives Matter and this COVID thing is all on top of everybody's mind. So from your perspective as a human and as a newly elected mayor, I'd love to know your perspective on a few of those things.
Sure. So there are a number of things that we're working on right now. I actually just got off a call with the CEO of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, Ann Gill, right before we started here, talking about ways that the city could continue to partner with the Tempe Chamber of Commerce to support our local and medium-sized businesses during this time. Thomas and I were on a call just yesterday having a very similar conversation about things we could do to support a lot of our businesses in the downtown area, but also all throughout the city of Tempe. And so I really consider these organizations, the Tempe Chamber of Commerce, Local First Arizona, they really are organizations that are partners with the city of Tempe and provide so many resources and so much support to a lot of our businesses. And so my perspective as mayor is we have to do whatever we can to treat them as partners and make sure that we recognize the tremendous amount of knowledge and assets they bring to the table. So I'm really looking forward to working with them, especially during COVID-19, where everyone has just been ravaged by not being able to go out as much as we, used to spend money in a lot of our same local establishments, to make sure, though, that a lot of our businesses that are currently struggling are still here when we come out on the other side of this. At some point, COVID-19 is going to be over and we're all going to go back into the world like we once did. And we'll one day probably tell stories to our grandchildren about what this whole thing was all about. But at the end of the day, we still have to make sure that the businesses that we spend a lot of time at, with the restaurants I eat at, the dry cleaners I go to, all the folks that I tend to spend time with patronizing their establishments, that they will still be around when this is all over. And so that is one of my top responsibilities as the mayor of this city. And just sort of on a brief other note, I'm also spending time working on homelessness and other human services initiatives. Clearly, we have a lot of people right now that are struggling financially because they are either unemployed or underemployed. Many folks are on furloughs, so they're not making exactly as much money as they once did prior to this pandemic really setting in. So trying to do whatever we can to provide resources. And one of my big passions during my previous time on council was working on affordable housing and trying to make sure that there is quality affordable housing in the community, both rental and home ownership product, to make sure that we can really retain the diversity that Tempe really is truly known for. You can't be that kind of community if you don't have housing for everyone here of different backgrounds, demographics, and income levels. And so that's something else that I'm truly committed to as mayor of the city.
That's great. I'm excited for what's to come for sure. I appreciate that. What is from your perspective and from the city's perspective, what is happening with the police reform?
So we're currently working on some items internally right now. I actually was on a call less than 2 weeks ago with a couple of our senior staff members talking about a very lengthy plan about how we're going to address this. And one of the interesting things is in our city, the police chief, our union representative, those folks are all at the table during these conversations. We really want to have an open, transparent conversation about the best way to move forward collectively as a community. And we do plan on bringing city staff, Arizona State University, a lot of groups that have been actively involved on this front to the table. But we really want to have a bigger community conversation where all voices are heard, and we take a very thoughtful, reasoned approach to this. I've always told people that when folks will say, well, we just want you to cut 20% out of the police budget, I can't ever commit to things like that, because the reality is we have to really take a hard look at these budgets and think, if there are, let's say, functions that are currently within the police department that might be better suited for a human services department, then we can take a look at potentially moving some of those resources over there to staff up in those areas. But just simply, I think, committing to arbitrary dollar cuts or percentage cuts without really taking a much more kind of 30,000-foot holistic view of things isn't the correct way to govern. And so at the end of the day, my perspective is I'm going to really dive into this along with our city council and city manager and police chief and other department heads. But we're going to make the best decisions to move our city forward and make sure that we really are achieving the goals that we set out to achieve.
Good. Sounds good. Thomas, what about you guys from your perspective? Tell us a little bit about, what you're hearing in the community for, I know you're pushing the Black Lives Matter a lot. And I love seeing all of your posts. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'll try to tackle as much as I can. We're really viewing the current state of our community as dealing with, two huge global issues and national issues. Really, one is a global pandemic that is exposing some of the weaknesses that exist in how our economy is structured, and the importance that as we recover from the challenges throughout the pandemic, that we need to place a really high priority on centering local ownership and small businesses as part of our long-term economic revitalization plans. Should another catastrophe occur or a challenging times come about, we need to make sure that we're developing an economy that strengthens and helps small businesses stay competitive and have strength, not only through challenging times, but through good times as well. So over the last 4 months, we have really been just trying to help save as many small businesses as possible. There's a lot of small businesses that we're familiar with and we see all the time, those brick and mortar retail, restaurant, bars. You probably have the person that's been doing your nails or your hair that you visit once or a month or every other month. And those are the businesses we tend to really think about during a time like this that we see all the time. But there's also a lot of businesses that are struggling and have been that we don't see all the time, like our home services, like hiring a carpet cleaning company to come to your home, or let's say you're planning on doing that remodel in your bathroom. There's a family out there that runs that business that had everything completely wiped out, right? No income coming in at all. So what's needed is partnerships, collaborations from a government perspective, from a private perspective, nonprofits, for-profits, to come together and integrate and work on solutions to help small businesses survive this pandemic. Unfortunately, we're not going to see every business make it out. A lot of businesses are continuing to evaluate their options, but we need to ensure that small businesses have the right resources and connections to the right resources. Until 4 months ago, probably most small businesses didn't ever think they'd have to apply for emergency injury disaster loan from the SBA. We're Arizona. We don't have tornadoes and hurricanes and floods that wipe out areas of our state. And so navigating those systems is a real challenge. And imagine if there's a language barrier, if your first language is English or Chinese or something else. So we need to make sure that all of these grassroots organizations helping small businesses have support. It's not just Local First. We've worked really closely with the Asian Chamber of Commerce, with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, all of these great organizations that have these connections in the community. And so really what we're trying to do is help these businesses get through this summer, get through this time so that we can start to recover. We can start to build more resiliency long term for our local economies. Now, at the same time, we're also dealing with the awakening of many people in our country realizing that we are absolutely still dealing with 400 years of racial oppression that our Black brothers and sisters endure every single day. And it's the responsibility, in our opinion, at Local First Arizona, for everyone to step up and make intentional actions, to have conversations with your family and friends about what it means to support Black lives, but also what steps you can take as an individual, as a business, as an influencer in the community to support this movement, because it is critical for us as Americans to step up and do something about it. So one of the things that we're doing at Local First is we're encouraging people to consider moving their money out of big banks and into locally owned banks and credit unions. Not only by putting your deposits into a local bank, does that local bank have people here in the community that are lending more to small businesses, that have ties to the community, that are connected right here. But when your dollars are invested in a bank that's far away, let's say one of the big banks, those banks have a history and a pattern of investing their dollars into things that aren't necessarily in the best interests of Black lives. A lot of banks have invested in private prisons for a very long time. They've participated in practices called redlining, where they will actually carve out areas of the community that they will not lend to for mortgages and homes and things like that. And so we're encouraging people to educate themselves about these issues. And actually the week of July 27th through the 31st, we're running a week-long campaign called Move Your Money, where people can get connected to local banks and credit unions, take the pledge to put their dollars right here in Arizona and take a stand for racial justice at the same time.
I think it's what you brought up is a really good point. Is there's ways that any of us can help in either of these things, right? So Corey mentioned from the government perspective, having everybody at the table, right? Somebody like me, who I'm a philanthropist at heart. I wish I could be just that. My husband says I need money for that. But every month I'm thinking, what else can I do to give back? What can I help in this community? What can I do? I'm constantly, I grew up like that, right? I have a family of entrepreneurs and philanthropists. So to your point, actionable things, we need actionable things that we can do to help, right? That makes a difference for me. If you say to me, okay, move your money, cool, done. Like, just consider it done. If you say, go support Black-owned businesses, done. Been there, done that, been doing that my whole life. So I think it's good for people for all of you to give others actionable items that we can do, whether it's donating our time. Like you said, there's a lot of people, Corey, that are going to be homeless. Okay. So what, communities and what organizations in Tempe can we volunteer? Where can we donate our time and money? So I think that's a huge thing, maybe a takeaway for anybody listening and for future is all of us can provide something, whether it's our time, our money, our words, getting behind doing actionable things. So I appreciate all of you saying, here's some things we can do to change things because we need the change, for whether we're talking about COVID or whether we're talking about Black Lives Matter or homelessness or any of that. So I appreciate you talking about the things that we can do.
Kelly, can I add something to what Thomas said too? Just in full disclosure, I mean, I'm a member of a board member for Landings Credit Union, which is a local credit union here. And a lot of my accounts are there. My checking account is there. My campaign account was there. My car note is over there. So all of those things are with a local credit union. But the thing that I love the most about working with them, and it's not just because I'm a board member, it's the kind of personal service they give. They really do know their membership. People will tell me all the time that they're amazed that from everyone from the tellers to the senior administration actually know the people coming into the credit union. They know their first names. They call you on your birthday to wish you happy birthday. And I can tell you that a lot of the money they give out from a philanthropy standpoint absolutely stays in the city of Tempe, in the communities that they currently have financial institutions in. And just a quick shout out to their, sort of new CEO, Brian Lee, who's been part of the organization for quite some time. When the George Floyd murder happened, Brian actually reached out to me at one point and said, we really at the credit union would like to take a stronger stance in terms of supporting Black Lives Matter and talking about this issue in a very public way and participating in some kind of, social media campaign to show our membership and the larger community that we do stand in solidarity with the movement. Now, in the past, I think a lot of organizations would probably say, well, look, we have members from all different kind of political backgrounds and ideologies, so we don't really want to wade into that issue. We're a bank, so we don't need to get involved in such things. But the fact is, Brian realized that given the moment and his own personal values and the values that credit union embodies, that they wanted to take a much more strong, forceful stance. And so I really appreciated the fact that, that not only him, but the credit union really did stand in solidarity, and they weren't worried or concerned about bad PR or negative press. They were simply concerned about doing the right thing and really embodying the values that our community as a whole supports.
I love that. See, we need more of these stories. It makes me, my whole body has chills. You can't see it because we're on air, but I love that you stand in solidarity together and have those, and they're not worried about, what if we lose clients? What if we lose patrons? They've been Landings Credit Union has been a great advocate and, sponsor of the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I've known them forever. Margaret Honeycutt is a friend of mine, and I think they're doing a great job. But to have them stand like that, it's like you want to put your money like somewhere in a company like that. I know, Jihan, you and I were talking about Cox as well. I think people need to hear what these bigger companies are doing so that they feel, as a small business owner, it's okay too. It's okay to say, if these big companies can do it and stand in solidarity, then we should be able to speak up our minds as well. I think you get a little, you get nervous or scared, what's going to happen if we say something, but it's okay. It's it's nice to have the example from these bigger organizations.
And I would agree with that. I mean, from a Cox perspective, the things that we're dealing with, of course, were, twofold. You have COVID that came out, and a lot of things we did, not just for our residential customers, but we basically took off some of the bandwidth requirements and things of that nature, then weren't charging people from a residential standpoint. And then you look at on the business side, we also had some other things that we were trying to either provide discounts and help small businesses as they get through, certain times for a couple months. So, and then you look at our responsibility as far as not allowing text to go into homes and continue to spread. So there's certain things that we did from an organization, that we're making sure that, from a COVID standpoint, that we're responsible and doing things responsibly within the community. And then you look at the stance that was, as George Floyd happened, I have to hats off to the organization I work for, because when you look at the leadership, and Alex Taylor, who was the grandson of James Cox, he actually had an outstanding internal email that came out and talked about what we stand for, and talked about how at Cox we stand with police officers, we stand with Black Lives Matters. We're in this together, and we need to find a way to actually get some resolution. So other things that we've done from an organization is actually have a couple of town halls. We had one actually today, and I believe one about 2 weeks after the Brooks incident in Atlanta. I mean, after that happened, it almost brought me to tears just to get the response from the organization, and it was a video response that actually came out, and to hear the emotion from Pat Esser and our leaders, and what they, basically saying that, we matter, I matter, because the challenge that I had, and I know we talked about it, Kelly, is, after all this kind of popped off, I had a conversation with my son, and I never thought that I would ever have, a conversation of that nature. You don't see yourself having that talk. So we had a conversation. He's 10, he's going to 5th grade, and, getting of that age. So, but it's things like that when you work with an organization and they stand for certain things, and like you said, once you have the larger organizations actually take a stance, and you see the sea change, and I'm amazed at how much it's changing and how much it's actually moving forward. So excited to see where our new normal will be, and kind of working on that.
I love that. From a business perspective, what about the economy moving forward, Corey? Is there stuff that we can do as a community and businesses to help that? What are you advocating for?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think there's things that we can do. One of the things I remember, I mentioned talking about my board membership with Landing's Credit Union. I'm so glad you mentioned Margaret Honeycutt, who was an exceptional CEO, and she was the one who actually recruited me for that board 10 years ago now, which I can't believe it was that long ago. But I still remember my meeting with her over in the old Riazzi's restaurant, where she talked about joining the then Tempe Schools Credit Union Board. So big shout out to Margaret if she's watching. But I was going to say, yeah, we have a big, there's a lot of initiatives. That's part of what I was actually discussing with Ann Gill, was how do we find ways to partner to let people know that there are businesses that are still operating currently, that still have the same goods and services on hand. How do we make sure that our residents, and even frankly residents in surrounding Valley cities, know that they're still open for business, and that we need to make sure that people find ways to support them? If you're comfortable going to a restaurant to go pick up curbside, then we would hope that you would actually go do that. And we really need to encourage people to do that. I know, organizations like Local First Arizona, really talked about, in Tempe, Takeout Tuesday, to make sure that, to call attention to the fact that, hey, on Tuesday, let's try to make sure that we go pick up curbside takeout from one of our favorite local eateries to make sure that they're still generating income. But I think that, and then I think there's other things too, even when I look at, though, from a bigger picture standpoint, Tempe is a huge hub for Class A office space in the Valley. And one of the things I've actually been having conversations with our economic development staff about, and a couple of council members and people in the community, is what is that really going to look like in sort of the aftermath of COVID-19? There are a lot of companies that are talking about not really sending their employees back to a real office space once this is over, either because they've realized that they're getting the same or even more productivity out of their employees working from home, or frankly, you've got employees who are saying, I don't want to go back to that kind of environment because I'm concerned about my own health and well-being. So one of the things that I've been asking folks who approach me and talk about, I've got a project that's still got a ton of Class A office space. And I know a lot of these projects were developed prior to COVID-19, but saying, is that really still the direction that we want to go in as a business community, is promoting all of that sort of large scale office space, when quite honestly, the model behind how people choose to do business may really be changing in a serious way moving forward. It's not to say that we don't ever need to build another single piece of Class A office space in the community, but it's really looking at what that percentage might be, what the appropriate mix is, because we can't just sort of continue to carry on as if COVID-19 hasn't happened and as if people aren't going to be making a lot of changes in its wake.
Absolutely. I know from a commercial construction perspective, my husband is an electrical contractor, as well as a Phoenix firefighter, but he is saying it's business as usual. Everybody acts like it's nobody, COVID-19 is not happening. They're, going crazy. So it's definitely worth looking at and doing it pretty quickly, I assume, what's going to happen with all that office space and turning it into, people are still going to need to collaborate though. I mean, people still need to come together. We still are going to eventually want to see each other. We work better together and face to face. So that's definitely not going to, like you said, it's never going to go away. But it sounds like if the construction industry keeps going the way it's going, they're just going to, like you said, they're just going to keep going as if nothing's happening. But it probably needs to be switched up a little bit.
It does. In my perspective too. I mean, clearly, speaking from the position as a just raging extrovert over here, it is very tough not being able to see people and shake hands and hug everyone. For someone like me who was getting over a recent bout with COVID-19, the notion of having to quarantine and be in my own home by myself for weeks on end, there is no worse punishment for someone like me than having to be completely removed from human interaction. So that is something that we clearly all need. And I think that, we are going to continue to need spaces to collaborate. We do need to see people in person and experience human touch and looking at someone and reading their body language in sort of a real-time way. But I think there are going to be some things that are going to change, and there probably will be some fundamental shifts in our economy and how we all interact with one another, even after there's a vaccine and the pandemic is a thing of the past.
So is that why you took your office ceremony from home?
That is why, actually. So we were planning on doing it was sort of a twofold thing. One, it was that the governor, 2 days before the swearing-in ceremony was planned, announced that they were beginning to shut down bars and gyms for another 30-day period. So that was also a sign that there was a real spike in the numbers in Arizona. And so the city began to kind of rethink, is it really the right image that we want to be sending, that city government's been closed for a number of months, but we're just simply reopening it to have this one ceremony. So that was part of it. But definitely there was the other part that my own diagnosis, which happened the day before the governor made the announcement. And of course, I realized there's no way I can actually be in public when I'm on quarantine. So, the decision was made because of a whole multitude of factors, my diagnosis being one of them, that we were simply going to do the ceremony online. And I think it was just fine. It wasn't the same as being in public and having a huge crowd. But at the end of the day, I didn't, work as hard as I did for one day and for one ceremony. I did it because there are really important public policy matters that are in front of us. There's true opportunity now for systemic change. And that's why I ran for the job. And that's why I'm so excited to have it.
That's great. I love hearing that. Anybody else having personal experience with COVID? Any family members?
Yeah, my mother-in-law was actually diagnosed. Fortunately, she's good. She's actually come out of it, but it was kind of a scary time because you didn't know. You start, having those questions, and it's hard. Like Corey said, it's hard to quarantine when it's somebody that's in your family and you used to, and you just have those challenges of what to do and what not to do and how not to offend and things of that nature, especially because she's my mother-in-law. So that's doubly, right? If I offend her, then of course my wife is going to be offended. So, either way, I got to make sure I, step lightly. But to Corey's point, I agree that there's going to be a change and a fundamental shift. And I think we've seen it, especially in the chamber, being serving as the chair and having, tough conversations and decisions as we were going through something that was so fluid and very ambiguous at the time. But just dealing with the initial, instance of COVID, and kind of as things changed and we started doing virtual events and having success with that, I'm actually excited to see what the new normal is going to be, because when you look at, the ability to maybe go to an event or be a part of an event from wherever you're at, maybe we have hybrid type of situations and connections. I'm actually excited to see what our events are going to be, what they're going to look like, after everything comes out. So I think there's going to be some opportunities. And on another note, I mean, with my kids and the technology that they're using, they're actually using Teams, and, my son's in 5th grade, and the things that he's going to be able to learn, I'm excited for that as well, because, he's actually came in and, we were comparing notes, if you will, because I was on a Teams meeting, and he came back and, I have that. And he gets all excited when his friends call him and they do a Teams call and they talk about their homework and everything else. So, I mean, from a technology standpoint, there's so many things that we can do. And I think that we weren't actually utilizing, but now we see, because we're made to sit in these 4 walls by ourselves and have thoughts on, and how we are going to connect and how we're going to do this and how we're going to make this thing work. So I think with the resolve of not only Tempe, but I just think our nation, I think it's there, and we'll find a way to actually get through this and actually come out better.
I think so too, especially with the help of everybody, all the people that are pushing for it. Even online, social media is obviously one of the things that I do, but it's neat to see the use of it for positive change, right? To talk about things, whether it's wearing a mask to protect everybody, or whether it's supporting, hey, did you know that there's, 15 small businesses in Tempe that are all owned by, are Black-owned businesses? Like, how cool is that they can list out everything and go, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I already knew that. We support that. Oh, good. I didn't know that. Let's, I'll buy my coffee from, a local company instead of outside. So I love, another silver lining. We all used to say social media was going to be the death of us, right? But I think it's a positive thing in that we can stay connected. Obviously, we need that right now, extrovert and all, right? But also for pushing those things that people may not know, right? If we are all at home and we're not in talking to everybody all the time, well, then what do we need to know? We need to know that there's, local companies that are struggling, okay, or changing your money from, somewhere else to buying local. Or so I love the social media push that everybody's hopefully using it for is good, positive, feedback and pushing those stories out, right? Pushing the stories of, hey, I had this conversation with my child. I didn't think I'd ever have to have that, and here's what happened. Here's what came out of it. I really think we need to continue to push those stories of whether it's Black Lives Matter or small businesses in the local community. Keep pushing that, or wearing masks to protect yourself. My husband's seeing so many sick people with COVID, and luckily he's protected wearing masks. So I think I just would hope that my call to action would be to continue to use social media for a positive change, continue to use your voice and talk about those things so that we can hopefully change a few lives and help people. Thomas, you had talked about earlier about supporting small businesses. What can the community do right now to do that?
I think Corey touched on a lot of it. I think it's about being proactive, about thinking through unique ways that you can support businesses. I think we all tend to navigate toward supporting businesses through takeout, curbside pickup, for restaurants, food, that kind of stuff is great. We want to keep continuing doing that, but also thinking through other ways that you can do so as well. Keeping your memberships for local organizations like art organizations and things like that. Is there a home project you're working on or you're going to be doing that you can reach out and support a local business with? And just having those conversations with families and friends and thinking of ways that you could be proactive about it. That might not be the typical ways you can do it, is something that we're talking about and influencing as well.
From a Cox perspective, what are you guys thinking is the future? What does the future hold for supporting, everybody, especially at home? Talk about remote working. Tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from a Cox perspective as far as working from home and what you guys are going to do for moving forward.
Well, I think this has presented us with the challenge of having to look at our business continuity planning and what that means from a perspective of not only a large business, but also small business. What are you going to do in the case, and how will you stay connected? How will you keep your workforce connected and productive? So from what we're seeing a lot of things are transitioning from on-site to the cloud, a lot of mobility features as far as phone features, phone system services, things of that nature. So it's where the pendulum is shifting. These things have been here for a while. I mean, we all know that the cloud has been on the uptick for probably the last 10, 15 years. But now it's prevalent and it's in front of us and it's facing us. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to provide solutions for it? So from a cost perspective, that's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to provide and ask our customers as far as what they're what's on their whiteboard, what projects do they have coming up, what are their from a 30,000 foot view, where are they going, and what are their plans in case something happens? Because I don't think anybody really expected to escalate as it did, but it did, and we're here now. So what are some of the solutions that we can do, or what are some of the solutions that we can put forward to make sure that businesses are solvent and they're still able to be productive? And then Thomas brought up a good point. I think from as far as keeping memberships and looking at that, making sure that we're staying engaged in the local economy. That's very important. I think about our local taco shop that I always call my buddy because that's one of our favorite places. That's like our go-to. Some other items when you think about and it kind of comes back to the chamber perspective. We had a lot of large organizations actually step up and either pay memberships earlier, upgrade their membership, or do certain things because they saw the value that the chamber was actually providing. Because at the time everything was going off, the information that you were given and getting from the chamber was valuable. It was something that you could actually take and move forward. And some of the connections that they made between the city, Gulf First community organizing and things of that nature were very, dare I say, it was groundbreaking. And it really kind of shattered every expectation that I thought happening, in live. It's like when you look at something, you're like, wow, we accomplished that. That's amazing. So given where we're at, I think that's one of the most important things, to make sure that we're staying engaged, that we're continuing to reach out to folks, whether it's being an extrovert. Yes, I miss my networking events. I miss the people that I work with because I'm usually not the guy that sends an email or IM or whatnot. I come by and I walk by your desk and I say, hey, how you doing? And those types of things. So I miss that, and my tribe and my people. But what I try and do is stay connected and make sure I either have phone calls, ping them on. Now I ping them on IM because I have to, and it sometimes can be challenging. But for the most part, that's what we're working on.
You talked about helping people that may not have the connectivity when this first started. Is that something that Cox is still doing, the supporting those people that may not otherwise be able to afford the connectivity?
Yeah, so we do have Connect to Compete, which is basically a program that we offer to low-income families that qualify for it. So it's a way for especially kids, because it's usually provided through schools, or the information is given through the school system. But it's a program that allows families to be connected, make sure that, especially in the trend that we're going, where schools are going to be virtual, so that can be a big push that you'll see coming from Cox Communications.
That's great. It's such great news when you have people coming together to do that. I love that. So on a whole nother note, tell us, each of you, we have not a lot of extra time, but some people have some extra time because they're not commuting anywhere, right? So tell us, if we had time, you have a favorite book or a podcast that you listen to, or that you've read lately, that people in the business community should be reading? Corey, you reading anything good lately?
Honestly, I have spent so much time reading things that are sort of city related. I have not really taken the opportunity to read anything from a leisure standpoint, which I probably should. And whenever I'm not reading documents from a city or work standpoint, I'm probably just watching TV and trying to practice some form of escapism. So I've probably watched, I would say, probably a third of the content on Netflix at this point. So I'm just I wish I had some magical book I could recommend to everyone out there watching this, but I unfortunately don't have one. But hopefully the other two folks do have one.
Thomas, you've been reading anything good lately?
I tried to get in at least a couple books here and there. I'd say the one that I've been recommending a lot over the last year is we are a part of a group called the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. They're based out of Washington, D.C., and they're an organization that helps uphold the Community Reinvestment Act, which was put into place after the Great Recession to ensure that the banks throughout the country were held to certain standards as far as investing back into the community. So it measures and gives them a score to remain banks regarding how much they donate back to the community, board service in the community, things like that. And I attended their conference back in March 2019 and was able to hear a woman speak. Her name is Mirsa Baradaran, and she's a writer and a professor. And she wrote a book called The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap. And it's an incredible book that actually walks through the history of the United States and our banking system and how the structure of the banking system has actually disproportionately been set up and created as a system to favor white communities over others. It's really, really insightful and an incredible book to read. And I've read it a few times. I continue to recommend it. And I think, especially right now, it's a really good dive for those that are looking to learn more, because there's so many different systems and things that we're hearing about. And I think it's an incredible book with a lot of factual pieces regarding how our banking system is actually structured. So I've been a local banking nerd now for 7 or 8 years at Local First. So I geek out about that kind of stuff.
We all have to have our thing, right? Jihan, do you have any recent books you've loved or suggestions for people?
Well, right now I'm working on the 5 dysfunction of teens, which is, Patrick Lencioni, I believe. And it talks about that you need that, basically metal sharpens metal. So you need some type of dysfunction and
to be able to correct it.
Yeah. So you just need to be able to go through it. And it's, I guess, a time that we find ourselves in right now. It's fitting that you see ourselves actually sharpening and looking. And to Thomas's point, as far as looking at some of the historic, I guess, impediments that have been in place for Black people and people of color, just in general, I would recommend, if anybody has time to watch something on Netflix, you can look at 13, and that was still an amazing, just an informational history of policing and our criminal justice system and what it has meant over the years and over ever since the emancipation. So when there's information out there right now, I think it's the challenge that we find is, yes, we're reading memos, we're going through certain things, we find ourselves soul sharing so much during the day, but definitely finding time to make sure that you're broadening and making yourself aware of things that really matter. If we're going to move forward and make any progression, we got to make sure that we have an informed citizen and we're dealing with, the facts and based on our history and what is prevalent in the world now.
I'm an auditory learner, so when you tell me, I'd love either audiobooks or to watch something like that, because I'm not political and I'm not a history buff. But it helps me to learn easier if I watch stuff like that. So I'll definitely have to watch that.
And one other plug I'll give is Jane Elliott. If you get a chance to either YouTube or watch some of her interviews, I mean, she is amazing. And when I hear her speak and talk about, just race and racism, she's, a smaller little white lady. And when she has a conversation and she talks about Martin Luther King and the death and what that meant to her, I mean, I've watched probably 10 interviews, and every single time she starts to talk about it, she tears up. And you could tell it's not, I mean, she literally is like, wow, she's really dealing with that in a different way. And it hits her, because she lived through it, and she talked about, what they were doing at the time. She was teaching a lesson about Martin Luther King and everything else. But I mean, just amazing to hear her talk about race and what it means. And once we get past the actual race of, she basically says there's only one race, and that's the human race. So once we can actually start looking at it from that perspective and having conversations and finding commonalities, then I think we're definitely.
I love that. We've been talking a lot with our kids too, and I think sharing those stories with your children and with your friends and having those conversations is going to be a huge movement forward, help the movement, right? Help it is the more we talk about it with friends and the more we talk about it with our kids, and hopefully we keep crossing our fingers that it's going to be better the next generation, right? But we can actually do something about it by what we're teaching our kids. And it's funny because they're always listening, right? You think that you're like, oh my gosh, they never, your kids never listen to you. But I loved it because I've had so many conversations with people. My son brought me his iPad and showed me 3 T-shirts that he created for the Black Lives Matter movement. He, created them and said, "Mom, can we print these? Can we get these made? I want to wear it to the grocery store." And we're not going anywhere, right? So he's like, "Where can I wear it? I want to wear it and I want to create one." I love that you can think that you're doing something, but when you see it or hear it in your kids, you're like, okay, phew, at least I'm doing it. At least I'm doing a good job, or at least they're listening to something good out of it. So I think that's another thing, is talking about, the next generation and what we're telling, what's the story we're going to tell, and what are we having the conversations with our kids about. Karen is on producing for us, and she's on the background saying, talk about the racism in small business and the arts podcast. So that's another thing people can look up that's she's doing on Phoenix Business RadioX. So they're doing a series, and I think that's worth the listen as well. We are at almost the top of the hour. Can you believe it? It's been almost an hour. It goes by so fast. So in a few minutes of closing, is there something, each of you, I'd like to tell us, is there something I missed? Is there something you wish I would have asked you? Is there something you want to share with everybody before we close? Corey?
No, I think it was a very expansive interview, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be on today. The biggest thing I would say to people as well is that, and I talked about this during my swearing-in speech a couple of weeks back, is that we're going to be fine. This is a really tough time. It's nerve-wracking. I can't imagine how challenging it is for people who are small business owners, who have sunk their entire lifetime fortunes into these businesses to make them work, and they're experiencing an incredible amount of hardship. But at the end of the day, I can promise that, this too shall pass at some point. We just have to do the best that we can to protect one another and support one another during this time. And the other thing I would just say too, coming from kind of a city standpoint as well, is sometimes there's this trepidation and frustration around mask policies and things of that nature. But the reality is your local government isn't telling you to do these things because they're trying to make your life difficult or because they're trying to harass you. We're doing it because we're really trying to stop the spread of a very serious virus and also avoid another shutdown. The last thing we need is all of our local small businesses that we support and that we love, and we know the people who run and own and operate them, to be shut down again because we see yet another spike in the cases here in Arizona. So if we're asking you or telling you to wear a mask when you go out into public, it's because we're simply just trying to get this situation under control so our small business people and our business community in general can continue to thrive. And so we don't have to, once again, shut down Arizona's economy. So that's the one thing I'd like to leave listeners with today.
Great point. Hugely important for people to understand the why, right? Is when I tell people to wear a mask, it's not just from anywhere. It's because my family's in medicine. My husband's a fireman, and seeing those numbers and seeing that it does help him, stay protected. And so that there's 100 firefighters in Phoenix that are off right now with COVID. Well, what happens if we have no more firefighters to come get you, whether it's, a COVID emergency or you break your arm or your child is sick, right? So it's not just to protect yourself, it's to protect others, but it's also so that we're not overloaded at the hospitals, right? It's not so that's a great point. Thank you so much for saying that, Corey. Jihan, tell us anything that you'd like to let listeners know or something I didn't mention.
I think we really covered it all, and I agree with Corey that we will come out on this on the other side stronger. It's definitely, as you see the changes in how we're adjusting through the use of technology and the internet, of course, that I think we're going to continue to actually push forward and make a way for us to come through.
That's right. We just got to keep remember the silver linings, right? Every day. What's the silver lining today? Thomas, what about you? Anything that I missed or you wanted to last minute thoughts?
I don't think so. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think we had some great points today, and I agree. We're all going to come out of this together. So we just got to keep working together on solutions. So appreciate being here today.
Thank you so much. So tell us, while we have you on, Thomas, how can somebody get a hold of you?
Find us at localfirst.com or on any social media channels. Look for Local First Arizona and get in touch. We'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you so much. Corey, how can people get a hold of you?
The quickest way is through my city email, which is Corey, COREY _Woods @tempe.gov.
Thank you so much. You were so quick to respond. I appreciated it when I asked you to be on.
At least I'm practicing what I preach. So,
Jihan, how can people get a hold of you in Cox Business?
Easiest way is probably email. It's Baron, BARON, .Cottrell, COTTRELL @Cox.com. And yes, that's my father's name.
Thank you all so much for being on. What a great show. I hope people got as much out of it as I did. Before we end today, I just wanted to say thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know you're all very busy to share some light and love to everybody. I appreciate your time. Thank you. You've been listening to the Collaborative Connections radio show and podcast sponsored by KLM Consulting. Tune in the third Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. Until next time, happy connecting.